Hello, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys. You are now entering Season 2 of the Swan Hockey Podcast. Swan Hockey is flying around the junior hockey world one episode at a time. You'll experience things dreams are made of, as well as things of terrible nightmares. Strap in, hold on, and enjoy the ride. And now, Swan Hockey.
What do you make of all the expansion?
Well, I think, it's something a function that's been going on. We've been having expansion for a long time, and it's just continuing. And of course, the changing hockey environment also is encouraging it a bit too. And I know there's been, there's a lot of reasons why, there's a lot of motivation for expansion. A lot of it's, it makes money from expansion. I know the NHL has encouraged some leagues to expand. And I know that there's also a perception, the player supply is changing. But the real bottom line at expansion, we got to remember, is business. And as long as there's going to be some money to be made out there by a league and by people owning teams, you have expansion.
Well, it seems the most expansion is happening in Tier 3. It's kind of crazy how big, maybe out of control it's getting. And the NCDC, I'm sorry, Bill?
I think it's been out of control for a long time, but go on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree there. I mean, and the NCDC, they've expanded quite a bit. And do you think they're almost in jeopardy of becoming kind of in the Tier 3 category in ways of, typically, I've always been of the opinion that, with Tier 3, you have to be extremely careful where you're going to play because not all are created equal by any means. You have to be very, very careful. There are plenty of Tier 3 programs that you do not want to play for. And I think we're starting to kind of get towards that with the NCDC. I don't think we're quite there, but I think we're at the point where you can't just where NCDC at face value, it holds less weight than it did years ago. You really have to look, okay, what division am I going to? What team am I going to?
Well, absolutely. There's be a parity issue. There's some, and hey, let's be honest. In some other leagues, that's the case too. They've gotten a little bit big, but NCDC, yes, has expanded exponentially. And really, as I always say, there are really 3 leagues within a league there. And I think you look at it that way. That there are 3 leagues within one league, and so yeah, It's a matter of looking at what programs. I mean, you have the Western model, which is not geographically friendly, but it does business. It's a very good commercial model. You have call it Mid-Atlantic model, I guess you'd call it, or Atlantic model, where it lives off the youth teams, and it's not a terrible model. It's not it's not a terrible model, but it's of course a different model. And then of course you have the tuition teams, and that is a whole different ballgame. And so you have one group that's not geographically favorable, but commercially favorable. One that's geographically not bad and commercially can work. Then you have another one that definitely works commercially in its own way, but in terms of player recruitment, it suddenly is a different ballgame altogether.
Sure, and I think this is the first time that we're seeing a complete different set of rules. And I said, not complete, that's probably the wrong word choice, but different rules and a different structure between divisions within the same league. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, because obviously I'm not in the closed door meetings in the NCDC, and I'm not 100% sure what their end game is. I think they're almost trying to make like another CJHL almost, like where the CJHL is made up of 9 leagues within the league. I almost feel like that's kind of what they're going for. They're just not completely branding it as 3 different leagues or 4 different leagues, but it almost seems that that is what they're going for, because they've committed pretty hard to running different models within the same league.
Well, I think they are trying to, I heard today from a general manager, they are trying to more or less get the rules standardized, get some sort of grip on the rules, and making some really trying to make a more stable and more universal set of rules. But the thing you do run into is, I think a lot of it has been opportunistic, and the NCDC, and we do know there are people there talking sort of about, sort of have an agenda of having their own either independent body or counterweight to USA Hockey. And so I think a lot of it's been opportunistic and
Sure.
there's some commercial possibilities, and also the idea of gaining power, because suddenly now you have more votes, you have more power, and so you can go a number of options. You could start your own shadow body from USA Hockey, or you could potentially just gain a lot of power within USA Hockey.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I don't know if it's right or wrong. I can't say that it's wrong. I think a lot of people look at it on the surface of, oh, the quality of play is getting watered down. Yeah, very good chance it could be, especially with the pay-to-play teams. But there's a lot more that goes into it than just simply the quality of play. To your point, there's the whole business behind it. And I can't say that it's wrong. Do I think it's right? I don't know. I don't think it's wrong, though. Whatever they're doing, it looks like they're working. They're pulling teams. They've pulled teams from the EHL, which the EHL has claimed to be a direct competitor, which you and I have talked about that before. It's not at the same level, but they've successfully been able to pull teams from the EHL. They're expanding. They're going into another country now, in terms of with expansion. So the business seems like it's working.
Well, it is to a large degree. And I think the thing you have to look at is that they've also went to some voids. In the West, you had the old Western States League. There was a little bit of a void there. And in Quebec, they're going to the Quebec Maritime region, where there is a little bit of a void. It's not like going into Ontario and going against the CCHL, or you're going against even the OJ. You're not going head-to-head with, in Quebec, it's pretty open. And in the Maritimes, I think they have a league that's vulnerable. So I think they are going into, obviously, they brought teams over from that league. So they are moving into territories that are targets of opportunity. And as far as USA goes, a lot of it is commercial, and so is political, I'm sure, too. That comes into play with expansion. But a lot of it's opportunism. The opportunity was there. You have these Western cities, the Western States League was what it was, and, after that, they had an opportunity to go out there. And in Quebec, they saw a void, so they could go out there. And the EHL, obviously, that comes to other issues altogether. Why that's happened with the EHL. That's a whole other ballgame of issues.
Sure.
And so it's something that I honestly don't think it was ever planned to work completely this way. It's something that just sort of has evolved, and it's like so much of the expansion. It's something that's evolved, but I don't think we went into a master plan 3 years ago that exactly this was going to happen 3, 4, 5 years ago. I think it's something that sort of evolved.
Sure. And I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in that Maritime division, the Maritime Quebec. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen at it, because I would still give the edge to the Maritime Hockey League, the Tier 2 Junior A League there. I would still give the edge to that league. I think there's advantages to playing in that league as opposed to not even NCDC, just unsanctioned in general in the same footprint. But I think that's going to be a big battleground. That, do I think the NCDC could overtake it? Sure, I think they can. But I think they're behind right now, and I'm very interested to see how that one's going to play out this year.
I think they have two advantages. Number one, they could force a merger. And number two, I think kids are going to think being in a league that plays in the United States, and it's true, they'll get far better exposure to college playing in the U.S.
Do you know how much crossover they're going to is the schedule out yet? Do you know how much crossover they're going to have I know there's a team in Maine in that division, but do you know how, other than going to Maine, do you know how much crossover, like how often they will come to the United States?
No idea. I'd imagine they'll come down for big league events. Whether they're going to be playing regular games down here will be another question. But they will be at league events down here, like when they have their big tournaments and stuff that are really showcases. I'd imagine they'll be down for that. And remember, in the NOL, when you're playing with the Southern teams, where do you get seen when you go to Blaine? It'll be the same thing here. You'll get seen, you come to Boston. And, that's probably one more time you'd be seen than if you stayed in the Maritimes. Remember the Quebec situation you have there, too, which really, to me, is the more plum thing for them, the fact they're getting Quebec teams. Because I think the Maritimes, it's nearly the same target as Quebec. Quebec's a major province that really doesn't have a very strong Tier 2 junior league. It doesn't really exist there. And so it's a little bit of a vacuum there that you could potentially come in and fill and, offer Quebec kids I see Quebec kids playing in the NCDC already. So it's something that again, you could see an attraction for it. And I think right now the Quebec teams are probably the more interesting of the two.
Yes, I do agree that I share the same opinion that the NCDC, will have a better opportunity going up against the Quebec teams than the Maritime teams. Again, I think they could overtake the Maritime teams. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm very interested to see how that one's going to play out. I just have the Maritime League ahead of it right now. I think that there's a couple key advantages. I think one, with them still being the Maritimes being part of Hockey Canada, I think that offers a lot of benefit and flexibility for players where obviously if you play in the NCDC should be past September 30th, you're no longer eligible for Hockey Canada for the remainder of the year. So if you play in the NCDC and something goes wrong, it really cuts off a lot of options. So that's one of the head-to-head battles that I think goes in the Maritimes' favor. Whereas if you play in the Maritimes and something goes wrong and you could get a trade, or if there is no trade, or you could go to the NCDC at that point. The other thing is, I believe I've heard one team I assume it's the same for the whole division, but we both know what happens when you assume. Maybe you've heard, I haven't, but I've heard for at least one team, it's going to be pay to play. So I could see that being another factor, and most of the Maritimes should be, I believe it's pretty much free, if not free. I think some teams, if not all, will charge a league fee that's small. But if some of these NCDC teams in that area are going to come in with big sticker prices, I could see that obviously being a turnoff.
It's time for the Season Pass Point Unlock Code for Episode 5. The Episode 5 Point Unlock Code is Progress. Enter the code at www.swanhockey.io to receive your points. Season Pass is free to join. To join or to learn more, visit Swan Hockey Digital at www.swanhockey.io. And now, back to the show.
I don't call it the big sticker prices because the Canadian teams typically don't. I think it'll just be, look, the BC League, they charge now. So I mean, being charged to play junior hockey in Canada is no longer an anomaly. It's something that happens. As long as you're not going to go too crazy about it, and I don't think they necessarily will, because going crazy about it is an American phenomenon. Up there they really aren't used to it, and you probably aren't going to be able to pull it off like you can down here. However, having said that, I think the biggest luster for the NCDC will be, remember, Canadian kids want U.S. college, and increasingly so. And so therefore, which league's more likely to get you U.S. college? If you're not playing major junior, you're not playing in the USHL, you're not playing in the NOL, what are you going to get? NCDC is the best bright option out there, unless you want to go out, and even then, it's debatable how much option
it depends, though, right? Because now we're talking about with the ages, because how many Canadian... If a kid, like you're talking about maybe the 16-year-olds or the 17-year-olds that are going to go NCDC, get some college exposure, and then in their plan would hopefully be to go to the Quebec Major Junior League at that point, or the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League at that point. I'm still in the habit of calling it the Quebec Major Junior League. But yeah, for those older group of players, the 19 and 20-year-olds, well, NCDC may, let's say it does offer, the league on the whole, I would say, offers a better college opportunity for NCAA, but we're probably talking about Division III at that point for these players. And how many of those Canadians want to play Division III? I think that number drops down tremendously. So I think it's going to be really interesting.
It does and it doesn't. Right now, they don't think very much about Division III because they don't think about Division III. But I have a feeling now they're going to start thinking more about U.S. college in general. I'm even saying from a practicality standpoint, like think of the financial, right? Like with Division III not giving athletic scholarships, and then with how weak with the difference between the U.S. dollar and the Canadian dollar right now, the Division III, there's a lot of obstacles there where a lot of Canadians, I think, say, hey, you know what? If I'm playing Division I, absolutely, I want to go. If I'm not going to play Division I, I'm gonna stay in Canada and go to school here. The one thing about that is, remember, if you're a good enough player, you're not going at full sticker price. They're going to get it down. And, so, again, it's like any other hockey player in the end. If you're good enough, it's amazing how those prices plummet. And, again, sure, some kids will do that, but I just think there's also supposed to be the attitude of, hey, you never know. It's playing Wheel of Fortune, and I think there's a certain glamour to it, and Maritime Kid, a certain glamour, of playing in a league that's an international league, and even playing in the big Quebec towns would probably be, playing in Quebec City and stuff like that. There probably is some appeal to. So I'm not sure they're going to do as badly against the Maritime League. I think in Quebec, which is a more important plum to me. If I'm worried about the Maritimes or Quebec, I'm interested in Quebec. It's a much bigger province. It's a place there's a lot more potential when you really come right down to it. And I think that the real plum is you can get Quebec involved, and Quebec has been sitting there a little bit sort of vacant in its own right all along. It's been sitting there a little bit vacant. And this could be something that's great for Quebec hockey too. There's getting more outlets for Quebec law players to play. It could be much better by having, because right now the outlets out there, they're just not the same in Quebec as they are in other places. It's not like Ontario, where an Ontario kid can play in a zillion different places. It's not the same thing at all in Quebec. And this might be also very good for local hockey.
Well, and Quebec's always been a little bit different. And like I said before, I'm not saying that I think the NCDC is going to do bad against the Maritime League. I think it's, like I said, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I just hold the Maritime League above it right now. In terms of Quebec, I think there's a ton of opportunity for the NCDC, because one thing that I've found, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion, Bill. I think it's going to be the same as mine. But I've found that the Quebec Junior AAA League, as they call it, which is their Tier 2 Junior A, but in Quebec they call it the Quebec Junior AAA League. I've found that to be a different style of play than pretty much everything else out there. Like, I feel like it doesn't really prepare you for anything. It's not a pro style play. It's not a college, US NCAA style play. It doesn't seem like, it seems like it's all geared towards, okay, if you can go to the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League, the Major Junior, great. If you don't go there, there's really not another avenue.
No, and that's why I say there's a void, because there is a league there, but it's not a league that's very effective. You don't see their players end up any place, and their young kids a lot of times go right from midget AAA to the QMJHL.
And just to clarify, Bill, I meant another avenue out of the Quebec Junior AAA League. Like, if you go to Major Junior, great, but if you don't go Major Junior, I've found that there doesn't seem to be much of an avenue out to pro hockey or NCAA hockey.
The only place there ever was, and you don't hear of it very much anymore, is SAGEP. That was a little bit, but that really, we haven't heard much about SAGEP in ages. And so it's something that, again, it's part of the reason why you see a lot of Quebec kids end up in the U.S., because that is their option, their best option. If they're not going to Major Junior, you go to the United States. It boils down to. And
sure.
So it is there. It is sitting there, and I do think, as I say, playing in the U.S., there is a certain glamour approach for some teams. Maybe not Toronto teams, because Toronto is the capital of hockey. If you're from Toronto, the whole world comes to you. Other side of the coin, if you're in some of the maritime places, you're going to say, well, the world does not come to us. It's not like we are a whistle stop for everybody. So it is, I think, they do have that situation. They have to compete and get players, of course, and there's a certain limited player base there. But at the same time, they certainly are in a good position to compete. And I think certainly Quebec, I think, was something that, as you're saying, and I'm saying both, I think in essence, there is a league there, but it's vacant because that league isn't doing much of a job. So getting teams there is absolutely sensible, very sensible.
And what's interesting is these teams could pick up steam as the season goes on because of what I said earlier about the Hockey Canada rules, about if you play an NCDC game, again, should be past after September 30th, you're ineligible for Hockey Canada for the rest of the year. What's going to be interesting is all those NCDC teams up there, they can recruit out of the Maritime League all season long, where the Maritime, after September 30th, they cannot touch the NCDC players. But the NCDC can pluck guys out of the Maritimes all season long, which is a major advantage to the NCDC. And let's face it, I mean, as soon as somebody's, especially with a lot of the players' mentalities these days, which isn't good, but as soon as there's some adversity, they're looking to jump ship. And the NCDC can capitalize on that. Like, that's a huge advantage to the NCDC. And I think the NCDC could I think you could wind up seeing those teams in that division get stronger as the season goes on.
Well, there's no question. And remember, there are a lot of people in Canada that are not happy with Hockey Canada, just like people in the U.S. are a lot that aren't happy with USA Hockey. But up there, a lot of it has to do with districting and other issues. There are a lot of restrictions that people really resent up there. So it's not like, like everybody loves Hockey Canada. Down here, people have problems with USA Hockey, but they're different reasons. But, so like I say, people have presumed that they don't have problems too, like we have down here. Don't make that presumption. And their problems are actually a little bit different than we have here. It's, there's definitely, it's not like everybody's universally happy in various youth programs and other places in Canada and say, wow, they're just doing what we love. There are a lot that say no.
What's interesting too, because I'm just thinking about all this now, like in terms of what I was saying about the NCDC recruiting out of the Maritimes. I wonder what's the team in Maine. Right? Like, so they're in the United States. They're kind of there on their own. You have the Maine Nordiques, who I heard do not have an arena yet for next year. Did you hear if they found one? I think they're trying to go to the community rink.
I think it'll get solved up there because it's not like Lewiston has, I think let's just put it this way, their negotiation weight is limited. Not the Nordiques, I think the town. It's not like you have 50 million things coming into Lewiston to rent the building. It's not like Trenton that can sit there and tell everybody.
I don't think the town owns it. It should be. It should be privately owned. But I guess same problem for them, right? Regardless of who owns it, you want money coming in. You want a tenant. You want events. But
an empty building is not happy. Except, I should rephrase going right back to Trenton. Unless you're Trenton, they seem to be very happy being empty. But most arenas are not.
They may be getting a team. I read that the other day too. They may be getting a team. The team from Utah may be moving out there in the ECHL. But for the NCDC, sorry, Bill.
It'd be great if they did, but biggest problem they'll have is getting a lease. If they get a lease, another problem they'll have is draw. If there's not a Flyer affiliation, there is a little bit of a concern there.
Well, I think the Flyers are still locked in for at least one more year with Reading, but I guess we'll see.
Exactly.
But for the NCDC team in Maine, it'll be interesting to see if they have their reverse problem. If the Maine Nordiques are recruiting out of them. Every time a Nordique player gets called up somewhere or unfortunately has an injury, or even if they just need a guy, are they pulling from the Maine NCDC team? That'll be interesting to see if that team has the reverse problem.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Swan Hockey Podcast. We remind you that season pass points are available to listeners. For more information, please visit www.swanhockey.io. Until next time.